The biggest concern with most Iranians at the moment is to put bread on the table and the possibility of once again planning a future. That is what they expect of the future president. It would make for their criteria for voting. Iran's to elect itself a new president and top politician in less than 2 weeks. But it appears any of the 7 candidates getting in will find his main challenge to be economic rather than political. For a look into Iran's multifaceted economy, economic challenges and possible solutions, stay with me, Leila Faramarzi, on Iran Today. Whatever plans the different candidates have for different economic issues would make or break them in the presidential race. Issues are inflation, poverty, unemployment, and skyrocketing prices for basic household goods. Principalists or conservatives blame problems on the Rouhani administration's looking to the West to solve the country's economic woes. The question today is, what will they, the candidates, bring to the table? Dr. Shaqaqi is Dean of Khwarazmi University's Faculty of Economy. He came to share his views with us at Press TV Studios.
Any cabinet that will take office would face these problems and challenges, which have escalated compared to the previous decade. As time passes by, the problems worsen. Another point to mention is that all the think tanks are predicting by 2030 no country would buy oil. This means an end to the oil exports era.
Dr. Raghfar is an economist teaching at Al-Zahra University, where we met him. He mentions the main reason for a high inflation rate.
The main reason behind the rise of inflation in Iran is what's called the costs push, which is mainly caused by currency manipulation. Iran's inflation has ranged somewhere about 14 to 15% when there haven't been wild fluctuations in the value of our national currency. But in the past 8 years, the inflation in Iran averaged 24%. The highest inflation level was recorded last year at 50%. It was mainly caused by the devaluation of the national currency, as I just mentioned.
Hassan Rouhani didn't inherit a bed of roses when he started out as president in 2013. International sanctions had been tightened in 2011, and inflation was at over 30%. And there appeared no way out but to negotiate a deal with the world's economic powers. That would be the JCPOA or Iran nuclear deal with the P5+1, the US, UK, France, Russia, China, and Germany. They would lift the UN's nuclear-related economic sanctions off this country in return for Iran limiting its peaceful nuclear program. The US pulled out, however, in 2018 and made things worse for this country.
The 11th government took office with a promise to solve Iran's nuclear-related issues, lift sanctions, and improve the country's international ties. But the nuclear negotiations that were expected to be wrapped up fast took about 2 to 2.5 years to conclude. Even after the JCPOA was reached, several issues, including banking relations, were left unsolved. The government put all its eggs in the basket of the nuclear deal.
Although it may not be tangible, the Rouhani government is said to have kept the economy afloat when it could have actually drowned by US sanctions, the oil revenues frozen abroad, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Not sure our Dr. Raghfar agrees.
It appears to me that we have all the resources to fund the public sector, but there isn't a political will to get that done. The fact that the government hasn't turned to taxes and that Iran's tax system is flawed and inefficient depends on how much they fit the interests of the decision makers.
Now, Iran's problem is indeed also corruption and mismanagement, not just external sanctions. Whatever weakness or malice and vice the government may have, it is not the ultimate force in the country to carry all the blame. The government needs tax revenues it cannot extract from the most powerful institutions or invisible incomes. It attempted selling bonds for public companies and enterprises, but those basically didn't land in the palms of actual private companies and investors who get the industry running and so create jobs. Dr. Hakshanas is a prominent economist who was, for his tireless capability, appointed governor of Golestan province when floods swept over the country in 2019. He joined us on Skype.
What the incumbent administration did was, instead of borrowing from the central bank and injecting stronger money into the economy, it attempted to address the budget deficit by selling treasury bills or other securities worth 200 trillion tomans. If the government didn't take this initiative, Iran's economy could sink into hyperinflation, as many experts were predicting following Donald Trump's withdrawal from the JCPOA in 2018.
Plenty of solutions suggested by economists, but do any plans and ideas put forth by presidential candidates read with those solutions to economic woes? Let's hear it from an expert. Have you seen any concrete economic plans by the presidential candidates?
I haven't seen any candidate with a comprehensive plan so far. I don't know if they have a plan, but they are yet to publish their agenda through the media or on their websites. The plans have to incorporate the priorities, including those for reforms, operations, how to address major challenges, their quantifiable goals, approaches and strategies. You see, a team of doctors must have a plan that identifies the challenges facing the patient, prioritizes which ones to address first, and determines the necessary treatment.
It's come to that time when any guess as to who the next president is can be second-guessed, when the expected outcome can make a U-turn. That's because electoral debates are underway. The first round was on Saturday, the 5th of June, and that was the economic round, when candidates could have recreated their destinies. Overall, the debate between the 7 candidates wasn't impressive. Although the 7 were to respond to predetermined questions, they basically seized the opportunity to respond to criticisms and attack one another and the outgoing Rouhani administration, or to promote their own plans.
We need to do things like levying taxes on non-productive jobs and at the same time reducing taxes on the producers.
When we carefully study the matters, we realize that the government's relationship with the economy and the economies with the people haven't been adjusted. Whenever the government faces a problem, it delves into the pockets of the people.
Dear Iranians, your economic conditions can be improved a lot, but that necessitates reforms that the other candidates can't make. But I have the plan and the ability to do so, dear people.
Unfortunately, in our country, the relevant authorities have become responsible for the protection of foreign currency instead of being responsible for protecting the value of the national currency.
Statistics show that almost 50% of people live below the poverty line. This doesn't befit the honorable people of Iran, that 7 million heads of households don't earn a fixed income and need direct assistance to make a living.
The volume of liquidity is more than 3,500 trillion tomans. This is brought about by banks producing money without the supervision of the central bank, creating super debtors. Currently, there are 11 super debtors who owe the economy 90 trillion tomans.
Before making plans to fight poverty, you need to ensure that you have the attitude for it. Do you have what it takes to fight poverty? One of the problems we have had over the past years has been that the people and the underprivileged haven't been the priority.
But for the better part, the debate circled around criticizing the present government's policies and Abdul Nasser Hemmati's efficiency when chief of the CBI, Central Bank of Iran.
Dear Mr. Hemmati, you have sources to make kingpins for steel, sugar and cooking oil, but you don't have resources to help the poor. He has destroyed the national currency. Now he's talking about the distribution of poverty. You have distributed poverty.
For instance, Mr. Hemmati said why the FATF hasn't been approved, claiming that he knows so much about the issue is why the economy is in the condition it is right now.
Hemmati, for his part, tried to exempt himself from the government's policies, saying Hassan Rouhani lacked economic vision.
First of all, let me say at the outset that I'm not Mr. Rouhani's representative. I was set aside from the central bank because of disagreements I had with Mr. Rouhani. He had the same problem you do. He didn't have economic insight. I urge everyone to consider this. Mr. Raisi said 2 groups of economists can comment. But if you don't have economic insight, which group do you listen to? It's an issue that's been solved everywhere in the world. Anyone who makes economic decisions must have economic insight.
I asked how Hemmati had won the reputation with many of having kept the inflation and decline of the rial under check against all odds. The many don't include our economist.
In
an 8-year period, when Iran saw war, occupation, political coup, and other turning points, only once the national currency fell 6-fold. That happened in a 3-year period when Mr. Hemmati was in charge.
Mohsen Mehralizadeh praised the 8-year performance of the Khatami government, calling his own policies a continuation of that reforms government.
People of Iran, all the statistics and political, social and historical indicators are a testament to the fact that one government managed to advance the country appropriately toward development by moving slowly, steadily and logically. That was the reformist government of Sayyid Muhammad Khatami.
As for Saeed Jalili and Amir Hossein Qazizadeh Hashemi, those were the 2 candidates that focused on introducing their own plans more than the others did. This means they spent less time on attacking fellow candidates.
You need to be able to create jobs, not add employees. This means that your agricultural sector should be able to do this. We checked how much work can be done in the petro-refinery sector, petrochemical, oil and gas projects, and energy consumption optimization. Also in agriculture, fisheries, farms, animal husbandry, and etc. We have transformative plans for each of these.
We've been making plans with the help of revolutionary youth over the past 3 years under the title of Salam Government. I can address the production barriers, structural budgeting, non-repayment of debts, bank debtors and tax issues.
In saying why he wanted to leave the judiciary for the executive, Mr. Raisi highlighted his fight against corruption, the source of which he said was mostly the executive, which he wants to reconstruct.
During my tenure in the judiciary, I faced numerous cases which are traced back to the executive branch of the government. I mean legal cases of corruption and economic rights. We investigate these cases with a steady perseverance. People know well that I know no borders in dealing with corruption cases, and it's been proved to them that I'm not all talk. I'm a man of my words. It's a key point that today we need to promptly deal with and correct the branch of the government which is producing such cases.
We popped out to see what people on the street were thinking, how attractive they found the candidates and their mottos. We also asked people whether they associated economic problems with sanctions or domestic mismanagement.
The point is that sanctions have become an excuse for mismanagement inside the country. If they select qualified managers with relevant knowledge and expertise to the area of their activity, we won't have the problems that we have today in the country.
I wish there were more severe laws against presidents who simply forget about their campaign slogans as soon as they win the elections. That's my personal idea though. Because in that case, they will stay in office for 4 or 8 years and just exacerbate the problems.
For me, who is grappling with problems of life every single day, baseless slogans won't do any good. In fact, we've been able to find ways around the sanctions, but unfortunately, mismanagement is still prevalent throughout the country.
Sanctions will not always be like this. Things will work out. Actually, we need to find a way to cope with mismanagement.
Pressure of sanctions is undeniable, but still the country enjoys enough potentials to flourish. The fact of the matter is that we've heard loads of these slogans since many years ago, but it's not enough. A tongue doesn't get things done.
Time for a short break. We'll be back in no time. The Rouhani administration is pushing to get the US to consent to its demands for sanctions relief before it goes out. After all, it signed the JCPOA in 2015, and it should see that deal's revival through. Before the 2018 US pullout, the Rouhani government even brought the inflation down to around 10% from double that, and kept it that way for 2 years till 2017. But with problems that mounted since 2018, it has attempted solutions that have themselves become problems. For example, to compensate lost oil and other revenues, it minted unbacked money, which it put into the government fund. Printing extra money caused its local currency, the rial, to fall rapidly, fueling inflation.
The reason for the rise in foreign currency prices is the outflow of the currency from the country. In the past few years, the economic policies have led to large amounts of currencies leaving Iran, a major part of which hasn't returned. The foreign currencies have been spent to import goods, but not only the goods haven't been brought in, but the money has also been frozen abroad. Much of our export didn't bring in any revenue for the country. Our money was blocked abroad under the pretext of sanctions.
Thanks for your attention thus far. Plenty more coming up. But let's make a quick diversion for a media review in the meantime to see what other outlets have to say. Here it is in words. The BBC reads, Iran's presidential election, 4 ways it matters, with a look at inflation and high prices. The economy has always played a key role in the Iranian elections, and it is high on the agenda of every candidate. Due to the precarious economic situation, Iran is now in one of its most critical phases since the 1979 revolution. The impact of sanctions exacerbated by the coronavirus pandemic has caused one of the worst economic crises in the country's history, with the inflation rate reaching 50%. When the government arbitrarily increased the price of petrol in November 2019, thousands of people took to the streets in more than 100 cities. Although some believe that radical change is necessary and only possible through protests and strikes, there are those who believe that gradual change is more peaceful and feasible through the ballot box. To save the economy is to strengthen manufacture. Tasnim News quotes the leader, Islamic Republic grown stronger than ever. The leader of the Islamic Revolution, in a live televised speech on the anniversary of Imam Khomeini's demise, emphasized that the key to the Islamic Republic's permanency is in the 2 words Islamic and Republic. In describing participation in the elections and making a well-informed choice as being the way to solve economic problems, Imam Khamenei added, everyone should consider himself to be responsible for encouraging others to participate, and he or she must participate as well. He stated that participation in the elections is a manifestation of the holy verse, most surely man is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and enjoin on each other truth, and enjoin on each other patience. In saying that the way to save the economy of the country is to strengthen domestic production, the leader of the Islamic Revolution explained presidential candidates should be committed to combating corruption, strengthening domestic production, and fighting smuggling and unnecessary imports. They must state this commitment today, so that if they do not do this after winning, the supervisory bodies may take them to account. The Financial Tribune counts 5 major challenges facing Iran's economy. As the 7 certified candidates are heading for the June 18th presidential election, Masoud Khansari, the head of Tehran Chamber of Commerce, Industries, Mines and Agriculture, draws their attention to the main challenges facing Iran's economy. When it comes to economy, everything is reduced to livelihood. This is while the livelihood crises arise from underlying macroeconomic factors. The new government should know that Iran's economy is facing 5 major challenges which, if neglected, will bring the country's development to a standstill. He was quoted as saying by the Persian economic daily Dunyay Iqtisad. Khansari believes that the next president must have a precise understanding of inflation and its dynamics, causes of capital flight, negative investment growth, reasons behind brain drain, necessity of reforming budget structure, banking problems, insurance, customs and social security reform, the complex system of sanctions and the real potential of Iran's economy. Well, that would be it for this segment. Do stay with us. To look at major economic challenges separately, I'll begin with inflation. Or rather, I'll make a second attempt at detailing, beginning with inflation. Inflation has reached annoying levels, such that commodity prices are not exactly stable. They're constantly changing, in fact. It picked up steam in 2018 with the US unilateral pullout and its reimpositioning of UN sanctions as US sanctions, as well as reinforcing and adding to those. Iran has faced the toughest ever sanctions on oil exports and banking since. Unemployment is always top of the list, with breadwinners thinking to vote or not to vote, and for who. To aim for the root of the problem, the root must first be identified. Negative GDP growth due to various problems such as mismanagement, incorrect privatizations and sanctions has led to the closure of some industries. This in turn has led to an increase in unemployment.
Currencies go up so much. Anyone intending to invest would need huge resources to start even a small business. And what the business returns, considering the large amount of investment, taxes, transaction costs, and others, isn't cost-effective at all. That's why we're witnessing unemployment in the country.
If unemployment means a lack of honest jobs, it makes for more alternative ways of putting food on the table. One of the drawbacks of rising unemployment and inflation, as well as sanctions and economic shrinking, is the spread of smuggling, for which it remains to be seen what solutions candidates have.
If the economy is transparent in terms of imports and exports to and from the region, it can certainly reduce smuggling. Smuggling occurs when prices are not realistic. Gasoline is smuggled abroad because it's cheap here and expensive there. It's because the price isn't reasonable. Similarly, home appliances are smuggled inside because they are cheaper abroad.
Sanctions have not brought Iran down. They can't put down a country this resourceful that easily, but they have taken their toll. Sanctions and monopolized revenues have meant the governments have had to make some bad or badder decisions, or decisions with limited usefulness. One of those choices is direct subsidies.
We should frankly admit that people's livelihoods are being threatened. We also need to say that the current conditions have been both caused by the coronavirus pandemic and the sanctions that have impacted all the country's banking and commerce for the past 3 years. This economic condition is the result of those challenges. People are under pressure, but we shouldn't forget the causes.
As corona became a big problem too, the Iranian economy entered a third consecutive year of recession, following the triple shock of sanctions, oil market collapse, and the coronavirus, COVID-19. In response, the authorities unveiled new rounds of cash transfers and consumption loans for lower-income deciles and households without a permanent source of income. Now, COVID-19 healthcare costs and social assistance transfers are forecast to add to the government's expenditure growth. It's noteworthy cash transfers alone would be insufficient, because a rising inflation will mean a reducing real value of those distributed cash transfers. Any sustainability of measures for economic recovery would ultimately depend on reforms that address the country's structural challenges. One of the structural problems of Iran's economy has been its reliance on oil export revenues. In recent years, the government was blessed by having to reduce its reliance of the public budget on oil economy due to external pressures, due to sanctions, that is. With electoral debates going on, question is, what do candidates plan to do to further reduce this reliance on oil? That's it for today. Thanks for watching from the whole team. But do remember, Election Day is 18th June, and the story is ongoing till then, continually, with special editions as well. So do stay in touch with Press TV. Bye for now.